Reddit. What is the most eerie thing that's ever happened to you? I'm a medic and firefighter. We once had a call for something normal, like chest pain or something. I can't remember. The caller said he was in his barn/garage, which isn't weird really around here. Anyway, we pull up on scene and something just felt off. No idea why, but something just told me in my gut that something was wrong. I decided to do a 360 around the building before we went through the door at the front that was clearly the entrance. I walk around and come to a window on the side of the building and look in. There was a shotgun rigged to the door. The guy had set a booby trap for us, and he had hung himself as well. We kicked in this plexiglass type material on the side of the building and entered that way. Guy was dead. Nothing we could do about it at that point. I would have been the first through that door. No idea why I didn't just walk through it that day. I've posted this before, but I feel it's a decent story. One thing to commit suicide, but why try to take some good Samaritan with you? I see it like a mass shooting. It's angry suicide. I was driving home per usual and got this random, unwavering feeling that my house had been broken into. I kind of laughed and said, please don't let my house have actually been broken into, out loud as I turned the corner onto my street. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to the house were the blinds on my bedroom window. They were yanked around and twisted up. Some guy that lives across the street turned out to have been stalking me and decided to climb through my bedroom window. He took nothing valuable, just some weird personal items. It was terrifying to walk in and see my things rummaged through. It was even scarier when I talked to the neighbor and they admitted that multiple people in the neighborhood had seen it happen, but they were all too scared of old dude to say anything. The weirdest part of it all, and I mean this guy took some creepy personal things, is that nagging feeling I had before I found the remnants of the break-in. I swear I knew before I knew, and that was such an eerie feeling. Something similar of knowing before I knew happened to me in 2016. I had spent the weekend out at my friend's house. This was a Sunday morning, and for some reason we had woken up earlier than usual. So we were just watching videos on her phone. Out of nowhere I got this really awful feeling on my chest that someone had died. I started crying and she calmed down. A few hours later my parents arrived there to pick me up, later than they said they would. And while I was in the elevator I simply knew they were going to be crying. When I met them outside they really were crying. My mom got in the backseat of the car with me and told me that my childhood dog had died. I had spent the entire weekend out, and the last time I had seen him was on Thursday night. It's even more eerie to think that all the times that I've experienced death, I was not around or present to actually see it. This story is particularly interesting because I was on 8th grade and my parents were somewhat strict, so it was definitely not usual for me to spend an entire weekend out. It was definitely not usual for me to spend an entire weekend out. They didn't want you there when they took the dog in. Yup, there was planning involved, and GP's subconscious picked up on it. It's a plausible explanation. Though, what kind of parent isn't open about this kind of thing? Open bracket. The kind that thinks they're sparing their child unnecessary pain. Whether or not it's right or wrong, I'm sure that was their intention. This happened last year. I was having a recurring dream where I was in the woods at night. I noticed a campfire in the distance. Whoever was sitting at the fire notices me and yells out, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" and starts moving towards me until I wake up. Late last summer I decided to go out to the woods for a hike. Once I got out there, I needed to pee. I hopped off of the trail to get closer to the creek so I could take care of business and not worry about anyone walking up on me. As I approached the creek, I see a hidden shelter and a man setting up a campfire. When he noticed me, he said, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" Nothing else happened. I apologized and went on my way. It was the only time in my life that I had dreams of an event before it happened. I was pretty shook at the time. Fun fact about the human brain, it fucking sucks. I remember reading about a psychological effect where someone will have a dream And then later, when they experience a similar event in real life, the real event overwrites details of the dream, making you think you dreamed almost exactly what happened. Kind of like déjà vu, where your brain incorrectly puts something into long-term memory rather than short-term, combined with dreams. Unfortunately, it's tough to find what I remember reading underneath the mountain of precognition is real, and how to tell your future from your dreams bullshit all over the internet. Edit, it's déjà-reeve. Thanks Walrus. Déjà-reeve, I believe it's called. The reverse, déjà vu, occurs when your brain makes a memory but confuses the timeline of it. The brain is wild. The best explanation I've heard for déjà vu is that your brain just stutters a little bit and computes the input from one of your eyes a fraction of a second before the other eye. So it seems like a memory by the time the info from the other eye is processed, even though it only happened milliseconds ago. I once met the same set of twins in the same day, one after the other, one at a library and then another at the mall. I like this response. It is eerie, but not horrifying like some other answers in the thread. I thought I was being followed by the same dude when I went up to him and said, "Hey, I saw you at the library earlier." He told me that was his twin brother. Small world. Or he was lying because he was stalking you. Seeing the twin at the mall was a strange coincidence, but then seeing their triplet at the hardware store an hour later was just plain eerie. I had one of those dreams that you couldn't wake up from. I knew I was asleep and I was aware, but I couldn't wake up. I was absolutely terrified, thinking that I was stuck in like a coma or something. I had a gun with me for some reason, and as the terror of not being able to wake up grew, I for some reason had a thought and belief that if I killed myself in the dream I would die in real life, and that was a better alternative than being in a coma. So I brought the gun to my head and pulled the trigger. I physically felt pain in my temple and heard the shot. I woke up right afterwards. I hate when you realize you're in a dream that you want out of immediately. I found a fair amount of success with shaking my head in my dream as hard as I can, because it'll shake my head in real life and wake me up when I have a nightmare. Instead of waking up, I just have this instinct to log out thanks to a few games I used to play. Unfortunately, in these games there was a timer of 30 to 60 seconds you had to stand still before you could log out, which applied to dreams. So I had to wait 30 seconds and terror next to terrifying shit multiple times. Lol, I'm so sorry I laughed at this. I get game element. 2. I get to create things when I've been playing Minecraft. Like from ground up on a molecular level. In my dreams I know that I'm dreaming. But I also know that if I could remember these really super obvious facts of creation, I could do it in real life too. Those facts never make it through the wake up process. There's a bit in Sandman where a little girl asks about flying, and Morpheus says something like you have all the knowledge when you dream, but are cursed to forget when waking, and I've been obsessed ever since with the thought, I wanna fly too. One time my husband and I were lying in bed and the bottom drawer to his nightstand slammed shut. There was no logical explanation for why that happened, and we still don't understand to this day. Edited to at, I should clarify that we were both awake when this happened. We were just lying there eating and playing on our phones and we both heard the drawer shut clear as day. My husband has a habit of keeping his lower drawer open, and we looked over and it was closed. Very weird. Phase 1, steal underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit. Time to go to work. Work all day. We need underpants. Hey. When I was in middle school, I used to spend my free time playing on my Gamma Boy or listening to CDs in my room. It was a 3-family house. Most of my family, including my parents, sister, and I, lived on the top floor, while my grandma lived alone on the second floor. My grandma used to take care of my sister and me while my parents were at work. She would frequently walk up the stairs at least twice a day to check on us. She wore out wooden slippers in the house, so we could always hear her walking around on her floor, and especially when she was coming upstairs. One weekend while I was alone at home with my grandma, I was sitting on my bed playing my Gamma Boy when I heard my grandma's unmistakable footsteps coming up the stairs. I heard her walking down the hallway and stopping in front of my door. I looked up to meet her gaze, but there was no one there. I felt startled and ran out of my room to check the hallway, kitchen, and stairs. But I couldn't find anyone else upstairs besides me. I found my grandma sitting downstairs on the couch watching television. Your grandma must have been great at ding dong ditch in her youth. My ex and I lived in a remote part of northern Nevada. The house was literally in the middle of a field and our neighbors were far away. He worked nights and I never liked how dark and quiet it was. On a night he was working, I fell asleep and had a dream about him. In the dream, he was standing on the edge of a cliff, like the Grand Canyon, looking out at the view. I tried many times to get his attention, but he wouldn't acknowledge me. He was just staring straight ahead. After ignoring me for a while, he abruptly turned to me and grabbed the outside of my arms firmly. His face looked panicked and he said, "Name. There's somebody in the house." Like the movies. My eyes shot open and I woke up with my blood running cold. I lay in bed silently, listening for any sound. I was even more terrified when the dog woke up almost immediately, started barking, and ran out his dog door into the yard. What did he hear? I never saw or heard anything out of place. I couldn't see anything outside in the dark. The dog came back in and fell asleep. I stayed up the rest of the night, totally creeped out. Maybe your sleeping brain heard something in reality and manipulated your dream so you could wake up and check it out. Maybe just your dog fidgeting and sleepy brain was alerted. I mean, anytime my dream is constantly revolving around going to the bathroom, I know it's time to stop being lazy, wake up, and go pee. Those manifestations are real. I regularly have saga dreams where I go through various versions of hell trying to find a working toilet unsuccessfully, then wake up about to pee myself. My brain comes up with some wild and wacky ways for a toilet to be unsuitable for use. Once opened a bathroom door to find a bottomless pit with walls covered in urinals. Once encountered a bicycle seat mounted above a floor drain. When I was 13 to 14 years old, some older boys threw rocks from a demolition site at me and my friend. One rock hit me in the face and knocked me down. I started bleeding profusely on the sidewalk and my friend was freaking out. We did not have cell phones since it was the 1990s and weren't near a payphone. An older man in his 50s or 60s stopped in a pickup truck and asked us to get in. My friend was like, "OMG," but I said, "No, let's get in. It's fine." This older man felt really trustworthy, but I didn't know why. My friend got in with me and he drove us straight to the hospital. The hospital took his name, my friend's, and mine when we got to the and the man peaced out. I had problems from the injury for 2 to 3 years, but I'm fine now, other than a small dent in my skull. My mom told me I should look him up in the phone book and call to thank him. There was exactly one name that matched his. It was an unusual name. I called it. The woman who picked up told me he had died 6 months earlier, but his physical description matched what both my friend and I recalled. I was able to look up his obituary and the photo matched his appearance. It was definitely eerie, and to this day, I don't really have any explanation for it. He faked his own death. Could be those federal witness protection programs. I had a neighbor I swear was in witness protection. For years, we joked about him being some New York Mayfair guy. Then we saw a new story about a Mayfair guy who went missing after turning on his cohorts. That looked surprisingly like our neighbor. 2 days later, we woke up and his house was empty. Never saw him again. I was a manager of computer repair for a retailer a couple years ago. We had a client's computer in the back running various malware and virus scans. I was doing morning paperwork in the back near the computer. This PC had its screensaver on displaying random photos from the My Pictures folder. Various family members. Children's birthday parties, the usual stuff. Then of my eye, I swear to God I saw a picture of a woman from the shoulders up with her throat cut. As soon as I realized what I was making out, I directed my full attention, and it was back to photos of a car show. As the day went on I thought nothing of it and proceeded to continue my work until I was bringing another customer's PC to the back to work on, and again from my peripheral I could have sworn I saw a bloody body inbound in a trunk of a car. At that moment I began to freak out. I grabbed one of my employees, explained to him the situation. We then sat for 10 minutes and watched this screensaver. It is against company policy to search through the client's personal files without absolute just cause. We then proceeded to see a photo to bodies in a shallow grave out in the woods and another photo of a severed hand down in kitchen drawer. I then went and got the general manager and informed him of the situation and had him view the screensaver. We then felt that I would be in everyone's best interest to contact law enforcement. In about 15 minutes later, owner of the computer and another gentleman show up. I proceed to tell him that his computer is not ready and it will be a while. He then informs me that he was called there because someone reported there was some photographs of a grisly murder that we had found. I showed him his computer and then his partner then begins to laugh at him. Apparently he went against police policy and took some of his work home with him and had never noticed his work photos were being used as a screensaver. ///////////////// TLDR ///////// A detective unknowingly brings me his computer filled with gory homicide pictures that get mixed in with his screensaver. I soil myself thinking I'm dealing with a murder. Call the cops and the detective returns to investigate his own computer. Or, at least, that's what they told you. During a severe thunder/lightning storm one night, I was alone in the cathedral, high up in the loft above the nave practicing the large pipe organ for a forthcoming recital. The flashing lightning illuminated the stained glass around the pipes with such intensity that it made the biblical characters seem to jump out of the windows and remain suspended in midair all around me, as if they had somehow come to life. Bro got haunted by Jesus. He just wanted to tell him it's pronounced the Hispanic way. Tee. This made me chuckle out loud. Hatsus. Sleep paralysis. I've had 2 episodes in my life, but the first one will stick with me forever. My bed was in a corner of my room. My closet was in the opposite corner, no door on the closet, and it was stacked with a ton of junk. Community storage for the householders. I never used it. I wake up lying on my back, with the door in line of sight. I can see that it's full, but I can also see a hand slide out and grip the door frame. Pale and feminine, followed by the slowly emerging frame of a very tall woman clad in a white Victorian era dress. She was almost pretty, aside from something in her face that wasn't quite right. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I remember being uneasy about it for a while, probably about 15 minutes. She just stood there, talking to herself. I wasn't able to make out anything she said, but that's when the panic set in. I realized I couldn't move or speak, couldn't look away, and had no idea what was happening, as I felt fully awake. Then she stopped, looked me in the eye and smiled, and the corners of her mouth pulled back to her ears. Terrifying. She started to approach, and slowly opened her mouth so wide her chin was touching where I'd estimate the bottom of her rib sat. It wasn't long before I could smell her rotten breath, and she began to crawl on top of me. The entire time, she was letting out this awful, multi-toned moan that sounded like 5 voices at once, all distorted. I could feel her weight resting on my chest. I couldn't breathe or scream as she inched closer. She put my entire head in her mouth, and I fully woke up when all I could see was darkness. I still get a bit panicky remembering that one. It felt so real. I'm so glad I opened this thread at 2 AM. Don't know why I decided to share this, but I overcame this fear not long ago. I used to be petrified of the dark, so afraid that I would not sleep alone. Even at 16 years of age, when I eventually got my own room, I kept the lights on, hugged a pillow, and cornered myself in the bed with the blanket covering most of me. Sometimes this fear would even creep in during the daytime. When, for example, I was at the big warehouse turned shopping center and suddenly got alone, my heart would start racing. The hugeness of the empty room scared me. That all changed when I got my camera and, funnily enough, stayed out full night, all alone, miles from home, to do astrophotography. I had been watching some videos, and when I got my camera, all I could think of was sitting alone beneath the vast, open, and infinitely large sky, watching the cosmos above. When the next day it was time to sleep, I did not feel fear. Somehow, the knowledge that in the grand scheme of the universe, a puny little ghost, if they even do exist, could do nothing. My fear of the dark and loneliness went away when I experienced how spectacular it can be. I like to think that if there was really a demon that night, it must have been sitting beside me pondering over the insignificance and fragility of life on Earth, just as I was. Come on over to /r/astrophotography. Years ago, I worked the late shift at a hospital, 4 PM midnight. My nightly drive home led me through back roads of fields and woods which often had low-hanging fog, particularly in early spring. I lived in a small town that has a lot of Civil War history. Ghost stories were so popular that area historians would do moonlight ghost walks where they searched for signs of restless spirits roaming the battlefield. The urban legend was that, in a war that pitted brother against brother, those soldiers who were killed by family became souls that were never at rest. I never bought into it, but one night under particularly dense fog did scare the ever-living crap out of me. At around 1 AM, as I sped through curves and hills, I saw the outline of two figures walking along the side of the road. The closer I got, the more I slowed down as I didn't want to hit them or anything. By the time I passed them, I was going probably 10 miles per hour. First I noticed their weirdly shaped hats. Then, the buttons on their jackets glimmered in my headlights. I swear to God, there were two Civil War soldiers walking in the fog in the moonlight. I could not breathe. The taller one, thin and gangly, looked up at my car and put his hand towards me. I hit the gas so hard, my transmission could barely keep up. I sped off into the night and, when I finally caught my breath, screamed several expletives. As I rounded another curve, I saw a small car, a Gia Metro, pulled over with lights flashing. Its hood was up and steam was coming from the engine. A man in Civil War garb stood close by staring at it with his hands on his hips. Damn reenactors were in town for some event and had car problems. To this day I have no clue why they were out so late. About scared me to death. That is awesome. I grew up in a two-family house, me, my parents and siblings living on one side, my grandmother on the other side. You're able to access my grandmother's side through a single door in the house. Once she passed away I slowly took over her side since I was in high school and wanted my own space. One night I was walking to my room at the end of the hallway. There was a small mirror on the wall at the end. It was pretty dark, but I was still able to see. Right before I entered my room I had looked up into the mirror and saw my grandmother standing behind me. So terrifying since this was around 3 AM. I had to leave the house and stay with my girlfriend. Stop wanking in my bedroom. I went to Tajikistan in 2019 to meet my new colleagues and learn the area I was to be working in. I was greeted by my employer and a few of my new colleagues at the airport and they took me to an apartment complex where everyone was housed. Every building was dull and dusty on the outside. Upon entering I could see hallways with tile flooring and metal staircases leading to each apartment. The apartments had heavy metal doors. I couldn't decide if I felt safe because everything looked secure or uneasy because why did everything need to be so secure? We walked up to the third floor and entered the door on that landing. As I walked in I was shocked. The floor was covered in immaculately detailed rugs, beautiful wallpaper covered in sparkling gold, plum and emerald colored designs, massive crystal chandeliers and beautiful antique furniture. It felt like I had just walked into an underground palace. There were two women that took my things, showed me to my room, and offered me tea, cake and a variety of snacks. Everyone was so kind and welcoming. It was around 6 PM and the women had prepared dinner for everyone. I was the only female in the group of colleagues. We were ushered into the dining room that had a long table close to the floor and surrounded by big beautiful floor pillows. We ate, laughed and had good conversation. Come bedtime one of the ladies brought towels and toiletries to my room and let me get settled in. She told me to lock my door, which I would have done regardless. The doors to the rooms were also a heavy metal door with large sliding locks on them. After I freshened up I got into my pajamas and got into bed to call my husband. We talked for about an hour before I started falling asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with my phone in my hand. I could hear someone singing. I didn't understand the words, but it sounded sad. Made my hair stand up on end. It sounded far away. I got out of bed to look out the window. In the distance was a mountain range with faint lighting behind it, as if the moon was setting behind it. The singing was coming from the mountains. It was both beautiful and eerily terrifying. I lost track of time. Not even sure how long I was standing at the window. I asked about it the next morning at breakfast and everyone just kind of looked at each other. Never gave me an explanation. They just said some things here are ancient. I'll never forget that experience. I was at first afraid that the group that had taken you wasn't the people you were supposed to meet. Then I was afraid that they told you to lock the doors BC they knew something about the men that you didn't. And somehow I had no clue what the ending was going to be. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. About 10 years ago, my wife and I were watching Paranormal Activity on TV. It was late at night. As soon as the final scene, terrifying, was over and the credits started rolling, we heard a large dog barking outside our front door. We lived in an isolated house in the country, had been in the house for years, and had never heard any dogs nearby. I ran upstairs and opened the door. No dog. Nothing. Dead quiet. My wife immediately swore off horror movies and hasn't watched one since. The first time I watched The Exorcist, the flat above caught on fire and I was made homeless. The second time I watched The Exorcist, some burglars broke into my home. While I was inside, I heard them in my bedroom and we managed to scare them off. I've never got to the end. I haven't watched it a third time. The Exorcism of Emily Rose broke my DVD player. I don't watch scary movies anymore either. I was watching that, and my cousin's dog vomited a huge pile of worms during the church scene. I was over at my parents' house and watering their plants this winter when they were on vacation. I go to my car and put in the reverse and this old man walking on the pavement and I make eye contact. He smiles at me and I smile back. And then I'm out on the way and putting in the forward and going to drive away and I still look at this old man. But then when I look forward and start driving away, he is absolutely gone. I look in all the mirrors and turn my neck and he is nowhere to be seen. Just gone. I love the idea of this old man out on his daily walk and deciding to absolutely fuck with you for no reason other than his own amusement. He just smiles at people then goes and hides behind a tree to really get lol. I have quite a few, but one of the ones from my childhood was a night I had to be 12 to 15 and was home alone. I was playing on the computer in our den and directly across from it was the door that went up to the pantry, which had a set of stairs that led to the attic. Suddenly I heard a loud thump, then the repeated thumps as something fell down the stairs. My heart stopped because there was a door at the top of the stairs that shouldn't have allowed anything to do so. I remember getting up and walking over to the door but being unable to touch the knob. Then the sound of pacing started above me. Slowly walking backwards, I returned to the den and curled up in a ball on the couch staring at that door as the sound of a thump followed by the sound of something following down the stairs happened again. This continued on for hours till shortly before my parents got home it stopped and never happened again. My dad went up after they got home and confirmed nothing was moved or anything, but I hated being alone so night after this. This was the same house. I wouldn't shower if nobody was home either though. It was just a bit odd. The one we moved into after this one was worse though. Please do part 2 of your worst house if you want. Just FYI. They followed up an hour ago or so. When I was very young and first started wearing makeup, I stopped by a pharmacy before going home from making a school project with my peers at their house. I ordered a cab and stayed at the entrance of the store near the auto doors. A very old tall man came in and flirted with me. I froze and he towered over me. He grabbed my face. I think his grip really scared me back then. He said he'd be back and went inside. People walked past and nobody spoke up. When the taxi came, I ran inside and cried. There's something highly disturbing about an old man with a strong grip. My great uncle was a nice man, but he always freaked me and my sister out because when he saw us he'd smile, grab us by our shoulders, and say, "How are you?" The man was in his 80s and still had a grip like a boa constrictor. Ow, I'm good. Ow, old man strength is so real. This is so stupid now, but at 5 I woke up to the shadow of a figure in the door. That's mom. I thought till I realized she was in bed next to me. This shadow does not move and just lingers, looking at us. I was horrified someone had come in. Terrified. I didn't move. The next morning I realized my mom had hung her bathrobe on my headboard post in a way the shadow hit it just so. /view 200D. It's so stupid, but that few minutes I just closed my eyes till I fell asleep. I was so scared. Don't feel bad. I'm an adult. Sometimes in bed I'll see a dark blob and think it's a person standing there, only to realize it's my desk chair. I worked at a nuclear weapons storage depot in the Nevada desert outside Nellis AFB for 6 years. It's now shut down. When people say UFOs are attracted to nukes, they are telling the truth. But so much more goes on. My first night there I witnessed a ball of light trigger sensor on fence line, prompting a security response. The ball got chased by 3 patrols as it flew directly above the fence line before finally taking a sharp turn out into the desert. We discovered 3 mutilated donkeys across a span of 2 weeks, all about a mile from each other, and seemingly dropped off out of nowhere. No tracks in or out. Various organs removed from each. No blood anywhere. No tears in flesh, all cuts. Scavengers didn't even touch the bodies. I witnessed a figure atop a roof of a structure just 30 meters from me and 14 other personnel. It was just standing there watching us. I took a spotlight and shined it up there, and as soon as the light hit the figure it disappeared. We all saw it happen. I heard a man laughing maniacally once. Nothing there. Sweep with night vision and thermals revealed nothing. 3 other witnesses. We wrote it off as the laughing colonel. An urban legend passed down by the security personnel for ages. While on patrol in adjoining conventional weapons storage area, me and partner parked next to a hot pad loaded with 500 pounds bombs about to be shipped overseas. Heard a soft cooing sound coming from the pad. Me and partner did a security sweep of the pad and the cooing kept happening and seemingly luring us past the pad and into the pitch black desert. Night vision and thermals revealed nothing. We did not pursue. Just did another sweep of the pad and moved along. While on training exercise our machine gun overwatch team spotted 2 figures on thermals in desert behind us. Exercise was immediately cancelled when security 1 said he didn't place any bad guys out there. Everyone locked and loaded. Set up a sweep. The overwatch team observed the figures going prone and backing away from our sweep element, then disappear when we got close. Our thermals confirmed trace heat on ground despite us doing the sweep never seeing anything. Weirdest event was when I was exterior patrol outside the fence line. Got called to respond to a truck approaching on side of mountain nearby. Not unusual. Most people didn't know we were out there, and we got off radars all the time we'd scare the shit out of. Visually confirmed truck on NVGs. Then suddenly the headlights disappear. We believe they've turned them off and are now approaching on foot. So call 4K9 and move to blocking position, where I know anyone will have to cross past us to approach perimeter. We are there for about 10 minutes when 1 by 1 patrol members overwatching us from high points on the inside. Call-in lights appearing at R12, 3, and 9 o'clock in effect flanking us, with fence line about 300 meters behind us. We see and hear nothing. Not even on NVGs or thermals. Dog never reacts. Suddenly panicked patrol calls in that the lights are rushing us. We are already locked and loaded. I tell my partner to put a grenade in the tube. Nothing happens. Dog never indicates. Our radios die, and after 10 minutes we hike back to fence line, only to discover we were out of contact for twice as long as I thought we were. Very paraphrased event cause on phone. But our radios only started working when we were back at fence line. There's more, but these were the highlights or events I'm allowed to speak about. The world is not as normal as you believe it is. Would love to hear more also/military stories. I once heard someone tapping on my bedroom door while no one else was home except for me and my girlfriend. But she was asleep next to me. Knock knock joke gone wrong. A knock knock joke you shouldn't answer. I work at a hospital and like to take a walk around it before I start work. It is usually dark and I feel safer walking there. I passed a car, stopped in the middle of the road, and I heard a loud run in my head. I literally said, I'm not going to run. And I heard it again louder. So I took off running and then heard running behind me. I didn't stop until I got to the street in front of the hospital door. I turned around and there were 2 men chasing me. I hate to think what would have happened if I didn't run. I think about that all the time. Chilling. So glad you listened to that voice. This happened to both me and my aunt. Over 20 years ago we were sharing a former old beach shack that had been converted into a rather cute little rental cottage. After a while living there we independently both started feeling a bit funny about the place. Just uneasy and feeling like we were being watched. The vibe started to get a bit ominous. Eventually I started having weird dreams where it felt like I was being pushed out of bed. Literally it felt like there was a set of hands in the middle of my back trying to push me. I could feel myself moving across the mattress. The sheets bunching up under me. It felt so vividly real it really weirded me out. I've never had any sleep paralysis or anything like that, so it was strange. My aunt ended up getting a new job and having to move after only a few months, so being a poor uni student I had to move as well. A couple of years later we were talking about that house and that's when we found out we were both feeling weird about the place and my aunt had been having the exact same dream as me, complete with the hands in her back and the moving sensation. This one made me uncomfortable lol. How old was the cottage? I used to spend my summers in a small beach town and some of those older beach houses are kinda creepy. I think it was about 50s or 60s from memory. It had been renovated a bit, but kept a lot of its original features. When I lived alone I was having a bath. About 15 minutes after I'd settled in for a relaxing soak I heard my kettle come to the boil and switch off. Electric kettle. I thought I must have just been hearing things, but something made me get out of the bath and check. And sure enough the kettle was full of hot water. I have no idea how it could have switched itself on all by itself. It worked fine 4 years after and never did it again. I've had plenty of scary dreams and nightmares. And spooky things happened that were later explained rationally. But the kettle wasn't a dream, and I still can't explain it. I was once having a nightmare that ended with something, an animal I think, stabbing me in the back with its claws. The pain woke me up, but when I woke up I still felt the pain and was paralyzed for about 15 minutes, not to mention the amount of fear and chills that I felt that day. When I finally got up and looked at my back in the bathroom, it was red like something hit it really hard multiple times. And I felt the pain all day. I still have no idea what that was. I've had a really similar experience, but it was a freaky little girl with really long nails that stabbed me in the back. Could feel the pain of it all day. First I've heard of someone else having a dream with a lasting physical effect like this. I had a dream when I had a really bad duty where I'd communicated with aliens, like proper greys, to help save a little boy who had an aneurysm. They were the only ones with the technology to help, and I was the only person who could speak to them. They put the kid in their little pod thing and started harvesting him for information for cloning and draining the life from him. There was a deafening noise of their voices in their language that I could understand that was basically saying, "We have all we need. We are taking over." I opened my eyes and sat up, fucking terrified. For a good 20 to 30 seconds after I'd opened my eyes I could still hear the voices, but they got fainter and fainter. One of my favorite aunts died at 94, leaving my elderly dad a much needed sum of money for his care. He had been recently IOU-conned out of his entire savings, while also left in deep debt by a man from a neighboring county, and I was working the DA from 200 miles away to build a case against him, all of which was unknown to my aunt upon her death. I had POA for my dad by then and was at the bank on a Saturday morning to collect the inheritance check. Myself and the manager were the only people there, so she directed me to the only desk in the lobby rather than her office. After sharing with her the circumstances that had brought me there and finalizing paperwork, she left to process a cashier's check in another area. Before putting away my aunt's death certificate, I placed my palm on it, whispering a prayer of gratitude to her for generously providing for my dad. At that moment, out of the corner of my left eye I saw movement. A coin was rolling across the carpet floor and spun to a stop 4 feet to my direct left. Stunned, I got up and retrieved it, looking around for the source. It came from the direction of the floor to ceiling lobby window, brightly lit by sun. No one was around, inside or out. I had goosebumps. When the manager came back, I told her what had just happened, showed her the penny, and asked if she had any possible explanation. She told me no change was kept in that area of the bank. It had been cleaned the night before, and I was the only customer so far. I half-jokingly said it's definitely my aunt then, letting me know it's going to be okay. The manager came around the desk and gave me a heartfelt hug. The conman was successfully convicted for fraud, elder abuse, etc., and sent to prison W/maximum sentence. I was able to ensure my dad was debt-free, comfortable, cared for and safe until his peaceful death. I carry that penny with me to this day. Not really eerie in retrospect, but it was freaky at the time. One night a few years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to a scratching noise in my room. When I got up to check it out, it stopped. I went back to bed and woke up 10 or 15 minutes later by the same noise. Looked around again and found nothing. This happened twice more, but I never found anything. On the 5th time I finally figure out that it was coming from under my bed, where I store all my cardboard boxes. It was just one of my hermit crabs that somehow managed to climb down a 4-foot tall dresser and across a room to chew on some cardboard lol.